Spanish village of El Escorial for a best-of-14 game candidate's final match against his friend, the Dutch number 1, Jan Timman. Short was accompanied by his wife Rhea, his baby daughter Cavalli, and his mother Jean, as well as by USGM Luboš Kavalek, his trainer. Kavalek is the custodian of Short's enormous database and prepares many of his openings, as well as the psychological approach for the match. As a former Eastern European Grandmaster, Kavalek was born in Czechoslovakia, he has an intimate knowledge of the psychology involved in these tense matches. The opening ceremony was a grandiose affair laid on by the mayor of El Escorial, and there was considerable local interest and worldwide media attention. In London, there were daily live commentaries at the London Chess Centre, attended by scores of chess fans, who listened to the analysis of international masters Peter Wells and Jonathan Levitt. Before each game, Short followed the same routine. After lunch, he took a short walk to the tournament hall and gave his wife Rhea a big kiss, and then exchanged high fives, basketball style, with his trainer before entering through a side door. Timman drew the white pieces in the first game, and as expected, opened with the queen's pawn. This is the move that's given Timman the most success in his games against Short. Short replied with d5, c4, e6, the queen's gambit declined. Knight c3, knight f6, bishop g5, bishop e7, e3, castles, knight f3, h6. This is the characteristic move of the Tartakova defense, a super solid system. Bishop h4, b6, bishop e2, bishop b7, both sides just developing their pieces, and now a rather paradoxical move by Timman. Bishop takes f6. Although the bishop retreated one move before, it now takes the knight. This is justified by the following sequence. Bishop takes f6, c takes d5, e takes d5, and now the bishop on b7 is rather stuck behind the pawn on d5, justifying white's manoeuvre. b4. This is the key move in the variation, and the one which is extremely popular nowadays. The first two players to look at this position in real depth were Karpov and Kasparov, who battled out many games in this variation in their first World Championship final match at Moscow. Black can now play c5 to try and free his position immediately and open up the game for his two bishops, but Short lost 2 games in 1992 with this variation, so it was no surprise when he played c6, move 12 by white, castles, rook e8, and now the white queen comes into the game to b3. The point of this move is to support the break b5 and to attack the d5 pawn, which would be weakened after the move b5. This is where Short's new idea comes into play. a5. Short had played this move 3 times before, so it was no surprise to Timman. In this position, Karpov had played a3, Hulak had played b takes a5, and had been crushed mercilessly just 2 months before at the European Team Championships, while Predrag Nikolic had played rook a b1. Timman had prepared his own idea, but as we shall see, it's not terribly frightening. He advanced the pawn to b5 immediately. Now this causes a crisis on the black queen side. White is threatening to take on c6 and break up the black structure, so the forced move is c5. Black is now threatening to get a protected passed pawn with c4, so white's next move is more or less forced. He takes on c5, and black recaptures. Black now has what are known as hanging pawns, 2 pawns on c5 and d5 which can't be defended by other pawns, and the game now revolves around the question of, are these pawns strong or weak? With his next move, white prepares to attack these pawns, rook a c1. And now we can see that the white knight on c3 might be able to go to a4, or indeed join in the attack with a rook which could come to d1 on the d5 pawn. Black has no choice in this position but to remove that knight, which is a shame because he loses the advantage of the 2 bishops. Bishop takes c3, queen takes c3. And now the c5 pawn is under attack, but black can solve this problem quite easily by developing a piece with knight d7. Timman now plays the move rook c2, which is a useful sort of move that means that white will be able to double on any file he wishes to. Black brings his queen to the b6 square, a very active position, defending the c5 pawn, possibly swinging over to the king side if needs be, and also looking at the white pawn on b5. White plays rook d1, a normal developing move, and now black decides to use the half-open file that he possesses by playing rook e7. White eliminated any possible back rank weakness with 20h3, and black brought his last piece into the game with rook ae8, setting up some threats along the e file. Timman's next move, 21 queen b2, was designed to give his bishop some extra protection to eliminate any threats of d4. Short played a4, which gives his queen a rather nice square on a5, and now Timman played a controversial move, king f1, which defends the bishop. I was asked during this game, why not bishop f1? And in a rather offhand way, I issued the rather prophetic comment, which was, well, if bishop f1, perhaps Timman was afraid of something like d4, followed by bishop takes f3, g takes f3, and then maybe queen g6 check, which might attack the rook on c2. Well, for an offhand comment, this was extremely prophetic, as we'll see in game 3. In any event, king f1 might look odd, but it is very, very solid. Queen a5, queen a3, and now all Short had to do was just play a move like queen a8 or rook e4, keeping the tension in the centre, and with a slight space advantage and no weaknesses in the hanging pawns, he would probably stand slightly better. Instead, he thought he'd seen an extremely clever tactic. He went d4, and this is the first crisis of the game. E takes d4, bishop e4 attacking the rook, and now Timman played an extremely good move, which is fairly clear, and I think Short admits he'd overlooked. Queen c3. Without this move, queen c3, White could get into some difficulties. For example, had he played the move rook cd2, Short would have been able to play bishop takes f3. And after bishop takes f3, queen takes d2 would win a rook. Because of rook takes d2, rook e1 mate. There are all sorts of cheapos. But queen c3 gains time to centralise the queen and force the black queen away. If now queen takes c3, rook takes c3, bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3, c takes d4, then White just plays rook on c3 to d3. And he's going to be a pawn up in the ending because that pawn on d4 falls immediately. This is a bit of a problem for Short, and Timman was also ahead on the clock at this point. Short has to keep the complications going, so he played the move queen a8. This keeps some pressure up on the long diagonal, and hopefully there are going to be some cheapos later on. Timman played the very sensible move rook cd2, doubling on the open file and getting his rook out of the way of that black bishop. Short took on d4, with c takes d4, and Timman responded with rook takes d4. Now the Short knight is on prise, so it went to f6, and Timman made what Short calls a rather cheap move, and in fact a bad move. He went queen a3. Now the point of this move is to threaten the move queen takes e7, with the point rook takes e7, rook d8 check, winning back the queen and achieving a one endgame. But this threat is easily parried, and the move queen a3 really loses the tempo because the queen is no longer in the thick of the action. Short played queen b7, just getting out of the way, and now he's threatening perhaps to play the manoeuvre knight d5 to f4. And indeed, this is what would have occurred had Timman taken the a4 pawn, which is on prise. Instead, Timman decided to swap a pair of rooks and try and simplify matters. Rook d8. Knight d5 by Short. Rook takes e8 check, rook takes e8. And already the players were entering a bit of a time scramble. Bishop c4 by Timman. A very aggressive move. Timman's trying to counterattack and he's looking at Short's f7 square. Rook c8, attacking the bishop. Well, Short's got to keep playing actively, he doesn't have a lot of choice here. Knight e5. Both players were playing their moves quickly. Knight e5 isn't really very good. As Short said himself, a lot of other moves were better because now there's a rather nasty trick. Bishop takes g2 check. This looks like a killer, but after Timman's reply, Short's in trouble again. In fact, Nigel had a very strong move here, but in time scrambles these things are easy to miss. It was pointed out after the game that rook takes c4 would have been very, very strong. Knight takes c4, queen takes b5, and now the knight is pinned on the white king. So rook c1, but then knight b6, attacking the knight again. It's very, very difficult to defend this knight adequately, because if queen c3, then knight takes knight, queen takes knight, bishop d3 check wins the queen. So there's a trick. Queen b2 for white. Now, if queen takes queen, knight takes queen, and white's winning the endgame. But as Raymond Keane pointed out, bishop c6, simply defending the black queen and maintaining the pin on the white knight, wins for black. After bishop takes g2 check, Timman just played king g1. King takes bishop would have allowed knight f4 check, with total calamity. Now, the bishop is going to be en prise later, so Short retreats with bishop e4. Timman replied with rook d4, attacking the bishop, and Short responded with knight f6, defending it. Well, this allows the f7 square to drop, but there was no other way of keeping the pieces together. Bishop takes f7 check, king h8, and now Timman was really short of time, and this is where he cracks up. And I have to say, this is really what separated the players in the match, I felt. Apart from Short's opening preparation being superior, he played the time scrambles a lot better. Timman played king h2. That doesn't really make the king a lot safer than it was before. So Short thought, well, why not have a pawn? Queen takes b5. And black has got material equality, and if anything, his pieces are looking a little bit better coordinated than white. Queen g3. This was Timman's idea. He's swinging his queen across over to the king side and trying to create some big threats by possibly sacrificing the exchange to take all the white squares. Short responded with queen b1, threatening mate, and that's always a good thing to do in a time scramble. Rook takes e4, a very strong move, or at least a forced move, but Timman's got an idea. He's built up a huge combination. Queen takes e4, bishop g6. And this is another critical moment in the game. In the middle of a time scramble, it's nice to play a series of moves that follow a plan and aim for a particular combination, because you can play them quickly. And I'm fairly sure that Timman had seen all this in advance, although he was very short of time. However, there is a flaw in his calculations. Short now played the move queen d4. Rather than queen d4, Short might have tried queen b4, which would avoid losing a tempo later on to white's combination. Timman played knight f7 check. Short must play king g8. Knight takes h6 check. And now, if g takes h6, bishop f5 is a discovered check picking up the rook. Or is it? Black can respond with knight g4 check, after which white should take back with the bishop. And then we have a very interesting position. Black is the exchange for a pawn up, but there's a discovered check coming, and also the black rook is en prise on c8. I've had quite a long look at this position, and I think that it's almost certainly a draw. Black has to play rook c3 attacking the queen, and after bishop e6 discovered double check so that the queen is not en prise, king to f8, I think white can force perpetual with queen g8 check, king e7, queen f7 check, king d6, queen d7 check. Have a look at it for yourself. I think it's a draw. Anyway, Short sidestepped all of this with king f8. And I can tell you that at the Hastings Congress, where I was analysing with Nunn and Speelman, we thought Short should be winning. Unfortunately for him, Timman has got rather a nice little trick. Knight f5, gaining a tempo on the queen. That's what I meant about playing queen b4 earlier. Queen c5, threatening to come back to c7, trying to exchange queens into a one ending. But now, an excellent combination from Timman. Knight takes g7. This threatens knight e6 check, winning the queen. Short has no option but to take. King takes g7. Bishop f5, discovered check. King must move. Goes to f8. Bishop takes c8. Queen takes c8. And now queen a3 check. Short played king g7, but a draw was agreed because Timman is picking up Short's final pawn on a4, leaving a drawn position of queen and knight against queen and three pawns.
The first two games I was a little bit too nervous. The second game I played exceptionally badly and more or less presented Jan with a point.
Playing white for the first time in the match, Short ventured the Rye Lopez, and Timman countered with the Zaitsev variation, which might have been a little bit of a surprise because he'd only ever played that once before. After 22 moves, a fairly level position had resulted from some quiet manoeuvring, and with all four pawns facing each other in the centre, I was expecting a lot of exchanges and a quick draw. Unfortunately for Nigel, he wanted more, and he'd been straining to find the right plan and consumed a lot of time. He went 23, rook c1, presumably overlooking Timman's snappy reply, bishop h6, that pins the knight on d2 to the rook on c1. Now, the most sensible course at this point would have been to put the rook back on d1, admit the mistake, and hope that Timman would go bishop g7 and repeat the position, because all white can hope for here is a draw. Unfortunately, Nigel wanted more. He took on d5, Timman recaptured, and now c4, an absolutely horrible move that blunders a piece. e4. Now the knight on f3 will have to move, and when it does, the knight on d2 is lost. The fact that Short can play c takes d5, attacking the black queen, makes no difference. Timman played queen to f4, with the point g3, knight takes g3, with calamitous consequences for white, and now Short is just going to be a piece down for nothing. An absolute tragedy.
I thought I struck very well in the third game. In my opinion, that was my best performance in the match.
Yeah, I agree with Nigel that I had the same opinion, but I still have this opinion that his third game was his best game. There are a lot of points in the game which are not so easy to understand, but if you look through it, it's a very instructive game.
Timman played the Queen's Gambit once again, and Short stuck to the Tartakova defence. He was saying, look Jan, you got no advantage against this last time. What's going to be your improvement? Well, we pick up the game at the point where Timman varies, with 18, rook fd1. Short played queen b6, and now he was threatening possibly to build up on the e-file again and create some threats. Timman, instead of going king f1 as he did in the first game, went bishop f1. And you may recall that I was questioned about this possibility during game 1, and I replied that I was worried about some move like d4, followed by bishop takes f3, g takes f3, and then the white king is opened up. Well, it's this tactical sequence that decides the game, but there's no hint of that at the moment. Rook ac8. This covers the c5 pawn a second time, thereby releasing the knight from its defensive duties. h3, knight f6, threatening to come in on e4. Timman's reply is a good one. Knight d2, not only covering the e4 square, but threatening to play knight b3, attacking two weak pawns on a5 and c5. It's at this point that Short plays, well, possibly his best move of the match, a very unexpected idea. c4. It cuts out the threat of knight b3, but normally such a move would be considered positional suicide because it gives away the d4 square. Unfortunately for Timman, he puts the wrong piece on this square, as we shall see. a4. That defends the b5 pawn, which Short attacked with his previous move, and in fact, Short has the initiative now. Rook e6, rook c2, rook ce8, and now Short is threatening to take on e3 with a rook, creating some horrible threats. Short certainly has the initiative at this point, and Timman is on the defensive, but he probably doesn't stand worse if he plays accurately. Knight f3, bringing the knight back to defend the king. Knight e4, queen a1. I would have thought that queen d4 was a possibility there, trying to exchange queens. Rook f6. And at this point, Timman makes a horrible blunder.
In tennis you have a very interesting expression. This is called unforced errors. I think in this match so far we've seen quite a few of them. I mean, you're not under any pressure from the opponent. The opponent doesn't have any threat, but still you make a mistake which didn't exist in the position before that. And that's probably very typical for games under such tension.
Well, it certainly wasn't Timman's best chess. 26 rook d4. 3 pieces could have gone to that square, and 2 out of 3 were okay. But this one loses immediately. Rook takes f3. Opening up the white king, g takes f3, and now queen g6 check. And this is the tactical sequence exploiting an undefended rook on c2 that I alluded to in game 1. So after queen g6 check, it doesn't matter what Timman plays. He's going to lose a pawn, and he's going to lose the rook back for a knight. He played bishop g2, but after knight g5, black is threatening queen takes c2 and knight takes f3 check. Timman played 29 rook c1, but then knight takes f3 check, king f1, knight h2 check, king g1, knight f3 check, king f1, and now, with that repetition, black is nearer the time control, and now knight takes d4. 33, queen takes d4, and let's look at the resulting position. Short's won a pawn, he's weakened the white king, but winning isn't going to be that easy. He's got a rather bad pawn on a5, his d5 pawn is on prise, and also Timman has a protected pass pawn on b5. Fortunately, Timman was running rather short of time, and his king being rather weak, the practical difficulties proved too much for him. But Short played very, very well in this phase of the game. Queen f5, king g1, rook e5, giving the d5 pawn a little bit more support and starting to bring those black heavy pieces nearer the white king. Queen a7, and now a brilliant move from Short, queen c8, getting behind the c-pawn and defending the bishop, and at the same time preventing queen takes a5 because of rook g5 threatening queen takes h3. If then f4, queen takes h3 anyway, because pawn takes rook is met by queen takes e3 check, picking up the white rook on c1. Well, Timman can try and avoid all of this by going queen takes a5, rook g5, king f1, but then d4 is very, very strong. Timman tried king f1 anyway, and Short, bearing in mind the previous variations, played rook g5. Timman has got no choice now but to bring his queen back into the defence. He's lost time. He went queen d4. Short played queen f5, bringing the queen back into an active position. f4, rook g6, king f2, king h7, avoiding any back rank checks. And now, Timman had very little time remaining. He hasn't got very many good moves here, and he's a pawn down with a weak king. But his final move of the time control makes things easier for Short. Rook d1. Why not, thought Short, take a second pawn. Queen c2 check. Rook d2, queen takes a4. And now, Short wrapped up the game rather easily. b6, queen b4, rook b2, queen e7, bringing back the queen into the kingside attack. Rook a2, queen h4 check, and now Timman is 2 pawns down, and Short's queen is coming into g3, creating even bigger threats. So Timman resigned.
Hi, this is Grandmaster Damian Lemos. First of all, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to receive more free chess videos from us, you can just click the subscribe button below. I would also highly recommend signing up for my free mail course, the 10 Grandmaster Secrets to Dominate Chess. During this exclusive course from onlinechesslessons.net, I'll share with you my own Grandmaster shortcuts to effective attacking, defending, and growth hacks to improving your chess without complicated books or memorization. So sign up by clicking the sidebar on the right, and I know you won't be disappointed. Once more, this is Damian for onlinechesslessons.net, and I'll see you in my videos. Thank you.